Democracy has largely failed Africa. The time for us to be looking at possible alternatives is now. When you look at the track record of Islamic law or Sharia law, right from the medieval times up to this time, we can tell that it is a better governance system than a wishy-washy one that leaves us with so many troubles. Despite the fact that the world sees democracy as the best governance system, it has left in Africa a trail of corruption, uncertainty, short-term national goals, a widening of the gap between the rich and the poor, and in some cases, wars and destruction. So it is important to evaluate other alternative governance systems. And Islamic law or Sharia law is a better governance system than democracy. I credit most of the findings in this paper to a gentleman that goes by the name Abdelkader Mubarak of the Department of Private and Islamic Law, Faculty of Law, University of Abuja, Nigeria. My brother, you did a great job on one of your papers. Islam as a religion is a complete way of life. Islam doesn't determine only what you eat or what you wear and leaves you uncertain about the governance system to use. Therefore, it has answers to all the questions man has. Islam is not a set of rituals. It is both a religion and a perfect way of life. For a non-Muslim, religion may be a private relationship between man and his creator. But for a Muslim, religion covers the whole of life. No sphere of human life is exempted from Islamic law. Both your life as a private individual and public life. This is why Islam does not make a distinction between what is religious and what is secular, nor does it recognize division of authority between Allah and Caesar or the ruler. In Islam, only Allah is the lawgiver because he is the creator. Allah therefore owns everything. Caesar, a creature of Allah or a ruler, has nothing except what has been entrusted to him by his creator. Thus, all aspects of life, religious, educational, social, political, economic, and legal, have their legitimate place in the all-inclusive system of Islam. This is why Allah calls upon Prophet Muhammad, may the blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, in the Quran, Quran chapter 6 verse 162, to say, قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Say, indeed, my prayer, my sacrifice, my living and my dying are for Allah, the Lord of the worlds. So Islam covers everything and leaves no stone unturned, including the kind of governance system man chooses. This means that the whole of life, the whole of the life of a man in all spheres should be an expression of complete submission to Allah, the creator of the universe. The Holy Quran is a set of laws and a set of moral orders. The Quran is Allah's word revealed to Prophet Muhammad. The language, meaning, and sentence structure are all from Allah, and there is no human contribution to them. The Quran is protected from any additions or subtractions. There is only one version of the Quran in the whole Muslim world. Any distortions would have led to variations in the difference of text. The Holy Quran, which provides us guidance in this regard, is Allah's revealed message to humankind. It contains verses pertaining to belief in the oneness of Allah or Shahada, and in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may the blessings and peace of Allah be upon him. It is known as the Furqan, the criterion or they discriminate between what is right and what is wrong, because it brings to light the distinctions between good and evil and truth and falsehood. The Quran sheds light on ethical and moral principles and describes how human beings must conduct their affairs among themselves. The verses dealing with ethical principles include issues such as interpersonal relationships, Muslim virtues, and the mode of conduct to be adopted in social and business dealings. Muslims believe that these principles are meant for the entire human race and for people from all walks of life and socio-economic backgrounds. This contention has its basis in the belief that Islam is the culmination of all of the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and then the Muslim faith, and its precepts, maxims, and principles universalize the reforms introduced by the earlier prophets, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Moses, Jesus, and then Prophet Muhammad. They also go a step further by making them complete and comprehensive. The Quran is a miracle and a challenge. Its miraculous nature is manifested in 4 ways: linguistic, historical, futuristic, and scientific. The Quran is the primary source of Sharia, or Islamic law. All other recognized sources are secondary to the Quran and validated by it. Knowing the circumstances of the revelation of a verse, or sabab al-nuzul, helps understand the ruling of the verse. Exegesis or tafsir of the Quran is based on personal opinions. Based on personal opinions is supposed to be avoided. In the preponderant majority of situations, the Quran only gives general legislation foundations and principles. Detailed or particular rulings are few and are given for the most important aspects of law. Evidence from the Quran on legal rulings can either be definitive or probable. A verse can have only one meaning, and some verses can have more than one meaning. The discovery of the true and intended meaning requires special expertise in the science of exegesis of the Quran, or tafsir al-Quran. The Quran is very comprehensive. However, it does not provide the specifics of majority of legal rulings. Its comprehensiveness is then provision of principles and methodology of the law. Specific rulings can then be derived using the Quranic principles and the Quranic methodology. Any discussion on Quranic legal rulings must take into account the philosophy behind the teachings of Islam. It is important to bear in mind that in Islam there is no dichotomy between the spiritual and the practical aspects of human life. In the Quran, spiritual advice is given in conjunction with practical advice. What a man does in his daily affairs, whether it is social, professional, or economic, has a direct bearing on his spiritual development and will determine his fate in the hereafter. Conversely, the spiritual development will have a direct bearing on what he does in his daily affairs. Thus, action of a believer, which can be termed amal in Arabic, is supposed to be the subject matter of all laws laid by the Holy Quran as an integral part of Islamic doctrine. The Quran, therefore, is a book not only of religious injunctions and beliefs, but also of laws and ethical codes, and must be viewed in totality. The shape of the Muslim community is determined not merely by rituals. Religious acts such as salat or prayer, psalm or fasting, zakat or charity are considered binding on Muslims not only as a means of worship, but also as a means of creating an environment of social harmony, cooperation, and self-discipline. Basic ideals of modern democracy. Democracy literally means rule or government by or power of the people. Logically and historically, implicit in this is the notion of majority rule. Representative democracy is a form of democracy in which the people govern indirectly through elected representatives rather than directly governing themselves. What exactly is democracy? We must not identify democracy with majority rule. Democracy has complex demands, which certainly include voting and respect for election results. But it also requires protection of liberties and freedoms, respect for legal entitlements, and guaranteeing of free discussion and the uncensored distribution of news and fair comment. Even elections can be deeply defective if they occur without different sides getting an adequate opportunity to present their respective cases, or without the electorate enjoying the freedom to obtain news and consider the views of the competing protagonists. Democracy is a demanding system and not just a mechanical condition taken in isolation. At a minimum, a democracy is a political system in which people choose their authoritative leaders freely from among competing groups and individuals who were not designated by government. Democracy, in Encyclopedia Americana, is a form of government in which major decisions of the government or the direction of policy behind these decisions rests directly or indirectly on the freely given consent of the majority of adults governed. Democracy is a political system in which different groups are legally entitled to compete for power and in which institutional power holders are elected by the people and are responsible to the people. Let us focus more closely on the basic ideals of democracy. First, in a democracy, the people rule. A popular sovereignty implies that all minimally competent adults come together as one body to make decisions about the laws and policies that are to regulate their lives together. Each citizen has a vote in the process by which the decisions are made, and each has the opportunity to participate in the deliberations over what courses of action are to be followed. Secondly, each citizen has the right to participate as an equal. Political equality implies equality among citizens in the process of decision making. Thirdly, each citizen has the right to an opportunity to express his or her opinions and supporting reasons for every other citizen, as well as a right and duty to hear a wide spectrum of views on subjects of public concern. Each has a right as well as a duty to participate in open and fair discussion. These are the ideals of democracy. These ideals are partly realized in features of modern democratic societies. One person, one vote is observed in the process of electing representatives to the Legislative Assembly. Anyone may run for election to public office. In elections, a number of political parties compete for political power by advocating alternative visions for the society. The political campaigns of candidates and parties consist in large part in discussion and argument over the worth of these opposing views. And everyone is permitted to have a say in this process, and the society tolerates and often encourages vigorous debate on all issues of public interest. Islamic law and democracy, different views. The relationship between Islamic law and democracy is strongly debated among people who were identified with the Islamic resurgence in the late 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. Some of these Islamists believe that democracy is a foreign concept that has been imposed by Westerners and secular reformers upon Muslim societies. They often argue that the concept of popular sovereignty denies the fundamental Islamic affirmation of the sovereignty of God and is therefore a form of idolatry. People holding these views are less likely to be the ones participating in elections. Many limit themselves to participating in intellectual debates in the media, and others hold themselves aloof from the political dynamics of their societies, hoping that their own isolated community will in some way be an inspiration to a broader Muslim community. Many prominent Islamic intellectuals and groups, however, argue that Islam and democracy are compatible. Some extend the argument to affirm that under the conditions of the contemporary world, democracy can be considered a requirement of Islam. In these discussions, Muslim scholars bring historically important concepts from within the Islamic tradition together with the basic concepts of democracy as understood in the Quran. The Holy Quran lays emphasis on what it calls shura, or consultation. Quran 3 verse 159, Quran 42 verse 38. Even the Messenger of Allah is required to consult his people in worldly matters, and Muslims are required to consult each other in their secular affairs. Now, it is true that such consultation and modern day representative democracy may not be exactly similar. However, the idea of modern democracy and the Quranic injunction to consult people may be the same in spirit. New institutions are continually developing, and human societies, depending on their worldly experiences, continually changing and refining these institutions. The Quranic text not only gives us the concept of shura, or consultation, but also contains no ideas of dictatorship and authoritarianism. Some commentators try to use Quranic verse 459 to justify obedience to any kind of authority, including a monarch or a military dictator. وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ, the verse says. And obey Allah, obey the Messenger, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and those in authority amongst you. This is certainly not the spirit of the verse. One has to see it in its historical context. The verse is addressed to Bedouins who were nomads and were not used to submitting to any authority. The Prophet sent his representatives to these Bedouin tribes, and they refused to follow instructions. The verse admonished them to obey these authorities. It cannot be used to justify submission to illegitimately constituted authority. And if read in conjunction with chapter 3, verse 159 and 42, verse 38, it implies strongly that one has to submit to properly and democratically constituted authority. Authority has to be legitimate and properly constituted. In the contemporary world, the concept of shura should mean a democratic process and the constitution of proper democratic institutions, for which elections are a necessary requirement. In Islam, no authority forcibly constituted or acquired by power of swords or arms can have any legitimacy whatsoever. The institution of a monarchy or a military dictatorship did not exist during the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. May the blessings and peace of Allah be upon him. There are subsequent developments and were legitimized by the ulama or some ulama in order to prevent anarchy. Thus, the ulama scholars conferred some legitimacy on monarchies, not in the light of Islamic teachings, but only to prevent anarchy. Some of them also became part of the power structure, but their pronouncements had no Islamic legitimacy. One sees this today in most Islamic countries. The ulama in Saudi Arabia and Iran and other Muslim-dominated countries are very much part of the monarchical power structure and legitimize everything the Saudi rulers do. And to some degree, the Ayatollahs in Iran are also part of the theocracy or the political structure in Iran. So Saudi Arabia has a monarchy, Iran has a theocracy. Thus, the absence of democracy in some Muslim countries is by no means on account of Islamic teachings or the incompatibility of democracy with Islamic law, but due to a host of factors: political, historical, and cultural. The imperialist powers, first of Europe and then of the United States, have also played their role. The early Islamic democracy breathed its last within 30 years of the Holy Prophet's death. The institution of a monarchy crept in under Roman influence. It is important to note that the capital of Islam had shifted from Medina to Kufa in Iraq and then to Damascus in Syria, once part of Byzantium, the eastern bloc of the Roman Empire. Muawiyah, may Allah be pleased with him and be pleased with all our deceased, who seized power without the consent of the Muslims, operated from Damascus and adopted Roman monarchical ways when Yazid, his son, was to succeed him. This broke the chain of the caliphate, because the first caliph was Abu Bakr Siddiq. He had no blood ties with the second, Umar ibn al-Khattab, who had no blood ties with the third, Uthman ibn Affan, who had no blood ties with the fourth, Ali ibn Abi Talib. May Allah be pleased with all of them.